Today we're going to try to read chapter 12, um, Fog of War in The Six Day Hero by Tammar Stein, um, to bring us back to what was going on. So they're at school, bombing has started. They're in the bomb shelter at their schools, at prospective schools. Maddie's at one and Benny's at the other. Um, so foreign governments are not helping Israel, but volunteers from all over the world have come into Israel to help. Um, if they have, a personal desire to do that. Now, the Israelis cannot maintain war for long because they can't maintain their reserves. So it costs them too much economically to keep the reserves because then all the shops are closed, which that increases unemployment. So they need the war to come sooner than later. And then you've got Egypt, Syria, and Jordan all attacking them from the north, the east, and the south. So um, it's not going good. Now, when we last read, Mahdi was running home as fast as he could, and that's where we're going to pick up today. All the west-facing windows in my apartment building are shattered, though the building itself seems fine. I run under the shadow of the eucalyptus tree in our courtyard. I grew up playing in the shade of that tree while my mother sat nearby with the other moms, peeling potatoes or doing laundry in large vats of soapy water, gossiping and laughing. My earliest memory is of spitting out a dried eucalyptus leaf because I'd thought it was a cracker. As I tear up the walkway, glass crunches and grinds under my feet. I push through the front door and race to the basement stairs that lead to our bomb shelter. There are smears of red paint on the floor. My heart clenches at the sight. It's not red paint, it's blood. I pound on the heavy metal door. It's Maudie, I shout. Let me in. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then I hear the clangs of the thick metal bolts sliding open. The door opens up. Mrs. Friedberg blinks at me in surprise. Emma, I shout around her. Emma, are you okay? Mrs. Friedberg steps aside, and my mom scrambles to her feet. She's holding Yoram, Ofer Geffen's baby. Maddie, she screams and runs toward me, still holding the baby. Oh my God, how did you get here? She grabs me with one hand and pulls me into the shelter just as a rumbling explosion thunders again. Mrs. Friedberg shuts the door behind me, and I'm home. My apartment building shelter is smaller than my school shelter. Even though there are fewer people, we're all packed in. Ephraim and Miriam Pinsky, the elderly couple from upstairs, Shlomo, another older man who lives above us, and Mrs. Friedberg. Ofer Geffen and her two younger children. Shira is stuck at her all-girls school, which isn't far from Benny's school. Esther Geffen, Shira's little sister, can't stop crying. She's sprawled on her mom's lap, wailing hysterically. Her mom is injured. Oprah's leg was badly gashed by flying glass, my mom tells me in a low voice. The first siren caught them by surprise. They didn't make it down the stairs before a shell hit. The window shattered. She makes a helpless gesture. At least the baby's okay. Oprah had tucked baby Yoram inside her shirt and curled around him as the windows exploded. They've wrapped her leg in white gauze, but the blood seeps through. The sight of it has unhinged 4-year-old Esther. It gives me the willies, too. Esther raises a tear streaked face, which is dotted with cuts. Her bare arms and legs have cuts, too. She didn't escape unscathed. The baby fusses, and my mom coos over him. He whimpers. She jiggles him on her knees, but that upsets him. He lets out a wailing scream that has everyone in the room wincing. Who's a beautiful boy? My mom croons in a calm sing song. Who's so big and strong? He smacks his little lips and she gives him her knuckle to suck on, and baby Yoram goes to town, sucking with all his might. No one brought a bottle for him. I realized what a blessing it was when 3-year-old Gideon slept through the shelling from the War of Independence. There's something terribly infuriating about a crying baby when everyone is stressed and scared. I want to scream, "Shut up!" except that it won't do any good. I'm impressed by how calm my mom is. It must be so strange for her, like time folding back on itself. Another war, another bomb shelter, another baby in her lap. Someone used the covered bucket before I got here. The whole room smells like raw sewage. There's a small transistor radio crackling with news. None of it is good. Cole Israel remains mum about the situation. But Syria's president, Atasi, announces this battle will be one of the final liberation from imperialism and Zionism. We shall meet in Tel Aviv. On Radio Cairo, broadcasting in Arabic and Hebrew, we hear that the Israeli Air Force has been destroyed and that tanks are rolling into Tel Aviv. This sets Esther wailing again. Her mom is pale and sweating with pain. My mom and I exchange looks. The baby sucks desperately on her knuckle. The mood in our dank, stinking shelter is bleak and hopeless. Nonsense, Mrs. Friedberg suddenly declares. Everyone looks at her as if she's lost her mind. Ah, she says, waving her hand as if to banish this dark talk. When the voice of Berlin tells me something, I believe it. Turn off that terrible racket, she commands Shlomo, who sits by the transistor. He looks at her slack mouthed. Immediately! We need happy voices now. When I was hidden for 2 years in a closet in God-forsaken Augsburg, I sang to myself, silently. Now we will sing with all our strength. This is a new side to Mrs. Friedberg. Not daring to disobey, Shlomo clicks off the transistor. Mrs. Friedberg starts us off with Hein Matov, a traditional hymn with an upbeat tune. Behold how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. At first, it's only her voice that rings out. She has a clear, strong voice. My mom joins in, swaying with the baby, then Shlomo with a passable baritone, then me, then Esther and her mom. The Pinksies. We all sing it. The baby falls silent, staring at us with wide eyes. He looks so astonished that I fizzle with laughter. My mom looks at me with a warm, fond look. Baby Yoram rests his head on her comfortable bosom, snuggling in. As soon as we finish, Mrs. Friedberg launches into Modeh Ani, and after that everyone has ideas. I teach them Scout campfire songs. Shlomo teaches us an old Romanian lullaby. Ofer sings a breathy Persian love song. I look at Mrs. Friedberg with new respect. She single-handedly changed the mood for everyone in our shelter. She made us hopeful and less afraid. Maybe my dad was right. She really is some kind of hero. During a lull in the shelling, I offer to race upstairs and bring back a milk bottle and extra nappies for the baby. The music no longer amuses Yoram, and he has started crying again. I can't really blame him this time. The unpleasant smell coming from his bottom would make anyone cry. Ofer looks at my mom with questioning eyes, silently asking her if that's okay. Quick, 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 my mom urges me. Mrs. Friedberg holds open the thick shelter door and I fly out. When I'm back, less than 3 minutes later, the whole room erupts in applause and cheers. My mom plugs the baby's mouth with the full bottle. Everyone sighs with relief. We pass around the bottled water and candy bars that we put in the shelter weeks ago. Shlomo trots upstairs and returns with a plastic bag full of plums that he hands out. By mutual silent agreement, my mom and I don't talk about Gideon or my dad. It's easier to worry about Benny, but I remind my mom about Mora Rivka. We agree he's in good hands. We sing more songs. Mrs. Friedberg lets Shlomo turn on the radio, but only if he keeps it turned to Kol Israel. It plays music. There are no news updates. At one point, I hear Esther say to her mom, I know why there's only music. Why, Motek? Ofer asks absently. So we won't be scared. Ofer kisses the top of her little girl's head. We all know she's right. It isn't until that evening that Kol Israel stops playing music. General Herzog begins to speak. The fog of war is covering the battlefield, and it is more of an obstacle to the other side than it is to us. The citizens in Tel Aviv going about their normal daily work might be interested to know that Cairo radio reported their city is burning. Tel Aviv is okay, Ofer says, her face stunned as hope begins to beam. Shh! Shlomo and Pinsky's hush her. Until now, we've only heard reports from the Arab radios gleefully announcing the death and destruction in our largest city, while the Israeli radio remains silent. This is the first real update on the situation of the war that we've heard since the air raid first wailed. The general continues to speak in a calm, British accented Hebrew. He tells us that we must keep faith with our military and our government. The fog of war obstructs the enemy, and so let us leave him with it. Mrs. Friedberg nods. I like this phrase, the fog of war, she says. I told you we couldn't believe those first reports. That night, everyone falls asleep in the bomb shelter, some propped up against the wall, others curled on the grainy cement floor. In the middle of the night, my sleep is suddenly shattered. The ground and air shake from the thunder of nearby mortar shells. It lasts for hours. Yoram whimpers and Esther moans, only half awake but in the grips of a nightmare she can't shake. Ophra hushes them. She croons Persian lullabies to both the little children. I can barely hear over the roar of war raging above us. We keep a small light on, and it throws deep shadows in the corners. It's hard for me not to picture enemy soldiers crouching in those shadows. The all clear alarm never sounds. At 6 in the morning, Shlomo turns on the radio. He had shut it off during the night to conserve batteries. After the rough night we just went through, we are braced for bad news. Kol Israel beeps in with a news update. The lead story of the day is that yesterday the Air Force dealt a decisive blow to the air forces of the Egyptian, Syrian, and Jordanian armies. 400 enemy planes have been destroyed. The Chief of Staff described the victory as unprecedented. Did you hear that? Gasped Oprah, but the announcer signs off and music resumes. Can it be true? My mom asked the room. The Air Force destroyed 400 planes? None of us can wrap our minds around that number. 3 months ago, it was national news when our fighter planes downed one enemy aircraft in a dogfight. And here, in one day, 400? Is the Israeli Air Force making things up the same way our enemies did? Mrs. Friedberg grins ear to ear. This report I believe, she decrees. We erupt in ragged cheers. Mrs. Friedberg hugs Shlomo. Ophra squeezes Esther and baby Yoram. My mom wraps me in her arms, and we rock from side to side in shocked joy. The elderly Mr. and Mrs. Pinsky start dancing. Unprecedented is a mild word to describe this news. In one day, our little Air Force of 200 planes has destroyed a force twice its size. It's unbelievable. It's incredible. It's a miracle. We are still stuck in our building's bomb shelter. The Jordanians are still shelling our city. But maybe the end of Israel isn't so near after all. Chapter 13. Day 2. Now remember, this is called the 6-day hero because it is a 6-day war. So this is day 2. We eat breakfast in the shelter. Though the radio news updates continue to tell us how well the war is going, the all clear still hasn't sounded. We all agree, however, that the shelling has slowed. Ema, I say, let me bring Benny home. No, she doesn't even stop to think about it. Baby Yoram is in her lap and she's tickling his belly. Yoram is a fat baby, and I always thought fat babies were happy, but he's very temperamental. He only lets Oprah or Mom hold him. When Mrs. Friedberg tried to feed him his bottle, he screamed and flailed his arms so hard he knocked the bottle out of her hands. It almost shattered on the hard floor. I think it hurt her feelings a little. She handed the red-faced baby back to my mom and sniffed something under her breath about German babies having better manners. Benny should be here with us, I say. He's safer staying where he is. Everyone knows it's safer to shelter in place. Even though Oprah badly needs to go to the hospital for her cut, we are waiting for the all clear. The hospital is a kilometer away, and hobbling there during shelling would be crazy. A kilometer is a little less than a mile. But Ema, he's probably losing his mind, I say. You know how he gets when he's scared. I picture Benny's rascally face scrunched in distress as he clutches his stomach. My mom clearly pictures the same thing. Her mouth twists in bitter worry as twin lines appear between her eyebrows. She shifts fat little Yoram on her lap, dislodging him from his perch on her chest. I can't let you, she says. It's too dangerous. Baby Yoram, annoyed that I'm encroaching on his turf and upsetting his cozy situation, grunts in irritation. His forehead wrinkles in ominous distress. My mom and I exchange alarmed looks. The last thing anyone wants is to set Yoram off. My mom jiggles him on her knees to distract him. I'll fly there so fast, I say urgently. I can be at the school and back here with Benny in less than 15 minutes. Please, Ema. I can't stand the thought of him in the school bunker with no family with us so close. I can bring Shira too, I offer to Oprah. Oprah is lying down, her face flushed with fever. Little Esther is glued to her side. No, moans Ophrah. Just look at me. I don't want to scare her. Leave her at school. I should go get Benny, my mom says, as if he understands. Baby Yorm whimpers and clings to her. They need you here, I say. Plus, no offense, I'm much faster. She snorts. I can't remember the last time I saw my mom run, even to catch a bus. I know you want to be a hero, she says softly, but this isn't the way. Ema, I say, stung, this isn't about that. Trust me, I just want to bring him back. I promise. And maybe it did cross my mind how heroic it would be to bring Benny home, but it is also true that he really would be better off here with us. Miss Friedberg watches our conversation with great interest, her sharp bird like eyes following our back and forth like a soccer match. God, my mom puts a hand over her eyes. I don't know. I don't want you to get hurt. There's hardly any shelling anymore, I argue. We'll be fine. And Benny needs to be home with us. Let the boy go, Mrs. Friedberg butts in. For once I'm glad that she's nosy and in everyone's business. Really? My mom asks her. She looks at the older woman, who even after a night in our shelter has her meadow gray hair in rigid curls and sits with perfect posture. Some sort of secret communication flies silently between them. I watch the two women holding my breath. Mrs. Friedberg nods firmly. She leans forward to pat my mom's hand in reassurance. Bring your brother home, she says to me. Fly back here on wings like an eagle's. I know this quote. It's a line from Isaiah. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will fly up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. My mom bites her lip and looks down. Yes, Mrs. Friedberg, I say. My heart skips a beat knowing I'm going back out on the rubble strewn street. I will. I plant a kiss on my mom's cheek and she closes her eyes. Go, she says, bring Benny home. Come back safely. That's pretty scary to send your child out not knowing if he's going to come back safe. So they're singing to keep their spirits up. Thank goodness for Mrs. Friedberg. Um, the Israeli Air Force destroyed 400 enemy planes. That is what I call a God thing. Uh, all right, so let's see what happens when he goes to get Benny. The streets are empty as I leave the shelter and go outside. It's another lovely summer day. There's just the small matter of war raging. I take a moment to compose myself in my building's entryway, and then I take off, sprinting through the empty streets. The city feels abandoned. No shops open, no cars on the road. The breeze stirs a few pieces of laundry that still hang from their lines. A blue and white Israeli flag flaps from the top of a building. A sniper has shot holes through the Star of David in its center. I make it all the way to Benny's school without incident. Easy peasy, my racing heart notwithstanding. Since it's my old school, I know right where to go. I bang on the door of the basement gymnasium until one of the teachers opens it. The familiar smell of old sweat and musty gym mats is now mixed with the body odor of too many people. Unlike the cheerful camaraderie in my building shelter, the mood here is bleak and panicked. Did you hear the news? I ask the teacher who lets me in. About the Air Force? No, she says. Her eyes are rimmed red from too little sleep. Dozens of small kids huddle in sad, frightened groups. No one brought a radio. How bad is it? I don't recognize this teacher. She's a new lady. She looks like an apple with a huge chest and skinny legs. Her hair is stuffed into a messy emerald green snood, only making her more apple like. She's clearly spent the night in her teaching clothes, and something that looks suspiciously like vomit stains the side of her long brown skirt. It's not bad news at all. I can't believe that I am the one telling her this. My face glows with excitement. We destroyed their air forces. Whose? She asks, confused. She's catching on that it's good news, but she hasn't absorbed the extent of it. Everyone's, I tell her. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, 400 planes in one day. What? She clutches me by the upper arms, her long nails sinking into my skin. The sour smell of sweat and bad breath watches over me. It's true, I yelp. Our Air Force caught them by surprise, and most of their planes were still on the ground. Are you sure? She asked, shaking me a bit. Yes. She loosens the painful grip on my arms, the pinched, frightened look slowly leaving her face. It was on the radio first thing this morning, I tell her. That's why I came to get Benny. We're going to be fine. We're going to win. She squeals like a little girl, then yanks me forward in a tight hug so that I sink into her massive bosom. I'm like a rag doll as she releases me. I catch a glimpse of her glowing, happy face as she plants two giant, sloppy kisses on my cheeks. She races off to tell the other teachers. I wade in searching for my brother. When I finally spot Benny, he is curled in on himself, rocking back and forth. Some of the older children are leading songs and games with the younger kids, but Benny isn't participating. Benny, I say. I put my hand on his curved back. He shakes under my hand like a field mouse trembling with fear. It's me, Maudie. I'm here. Let's go home. He raises a pale, tear-stained face. Maudie? His eyes are almost blank with panic. I feel nearly overwhelmed by the fear and need in his gaze. But I channel Mrs. Friedberg. I speak calmly, supremely confident. Enough partying at school. Emma's waiting. You ready to go home or what? His chin wobbles. I miss Emma so much. I don't want to be here anymore. I know, Benny. I punch him lightly on the shoulder and ruffle his hair. Anything to take away that lost, frightened look. So let's scram. A tiny hint of a smile lightens his face. Then he launches himself at me, burying his face in my chest and hugging me so tightly I gasp. I love you, Maudie, he says, his voice muffled in my shirt. I love you too. My heart swells with a wave of affection for my little brother. I didn't know how long I would be here, he says, his words muffled against my shirt. I'm so glad you came to get me. It feels like I've been here a year. His heart pounds so hard I can feel it thumping against my own chest. My heart answers his, beating loud and strong. I will always come get you, I promise him in that musty, smelly gymnasium. You never have to worry about that. We step out of the shelter, and Benny blinks in the bright sun. We can't dawdle, I say. Take a deep breath, and then we have got to run. Do you understand? My little brother looks at me with his big brown eyes. He slips his hand into mine and nods. Good. On three. One, two, three. We take off, running hand in hand. His school is a 10-minute walk from our building. I want to make it home in 5 minutes. We tear down the street, taking a left, then a right, running as if our lives depended on it. What are you doing outside? Someone yells at us. I skid to a stop and see a civil defense man peering at us from a doorway. We're going home from school, I shouted to him, standing in the middle of the road. No cars after all. Benny heaves for breath next to me, making the most of the short rest. Get out from the middle of the road. Stay close to the buildings, the man yells back. There are snipers out. Run, run, run. I don't bother to tell him the only reason we stopped was because he yelled a question at us. You ready? I ask Benny. My brother nods, and I squeeze his little hand. We're almost there, I tell him. We run and run, hugging the building, staying in the shadows, past the bullet-riddled flag, past the broken building with the cut laundry line. We're less than 2 minutes from our street. A white cat crosses the street toward us. I skid to a stop on the sidewalk. What's wrong? Benny gasps. His face is bright red, and he's gasping for breath. I've set a punishing pace for such a long sprint, and he looks wildly all around us. It's the white cat, I say, the one from yesterday. It seems like months ago that I saw it leap to the balcony and balance along the wrought iron edge like some kind of circus cat, but it happened only yesterday. It comes right up to us, head cocked sideways to look at me. Oh, Benny says, he's cute. The cat is pure white and small, even for a street cat, but he's graceful and light on his little padded feet. Yeah, I say, a smile coming out. He is. His nose is a perfectly pink triangle. I feel a twinge of guilt that I ever tried to kick such a pretty cat. I think of Gideon and send a quick prayer that he's okay. Benny and I crunch down. I put my hand out for the cat to sniff. The cat comes right up and rubs its little head against my hand, as if rubbing away an itch. Benny touches its tail, and the cat flicks it out of his grasp, making Benny laugh. Suddenly it raises its head, hearing something neither Benny nor I can hear. Then it takes off without warning, streaking away and disappearing in the dark shade of a nearby alley. Where did he go? Benny asks, squinting and half turning to follow it. Doesn't matter, I say, though I'm suddenly uneasy. We've stayed here too long. We need to go home. We turn the corner, and there's our building at the end of the street. Come on, I say, almost there. And at that very moment, a high pitched whistle pierces the air. Without pausing to think, I grab my brother and shove us both against the sun warmed building next to us. I press myself against Benny, covering his face with my arms. A terrible roar explodes around us. The ground shakes. The power of the explosion shakes the eyeballs in my head. It rattles my bones. When silence falls again, I lift my head and look, checking Benny for cuts. Are you okay? I ask. I can't hear myself speak. My ears are ringing. Benny just stares at me with a dumbfounded look. I run my hands over his bare arms and legs, but he's okay. We're okay. The shell landed near the end of the street. Blinking too fast, I step into the road to get a better look. Our building is fine. I feel a wave of weakness at the intense relief, but something is different. For a moment, I can't put my finger on it. Benny and I trot over to our building. I keep him a little bit behind me, my heart still tripping at the close call. Then I finally realize what's different. The eucalyptus tree in our courtyard is gone. It's just gone, pulverized into matchsticks by a direct hit from a Jordanian shell. If we hadn't stopped to pet the snowy white cat, we would have been racing under that tree the moment it was hit. Wow, Benny breathes, looking at the destruction strewn all over the courtyard. I start to shiver, shaking and jerking like a puppet being pulled by its strings. My hands look as if they belong to someone else. My knees feel loose and weak. That cat saved our lives. Benny tugs me. What are you waiting for? He asks. I realize that I've come to a complete stop, staring in shock at the giant scar where a huge tree stood a minute ago. Wisps of smoke and a campfire smell fill the air. Benny doesn't understand how close we came to dying in the courtyard of our building. Marty, he complains, you're squishing my fingers. I pull myself together with difficulty and unclench the death grip I have on his small hand. It's okay, I croak. We're almost home. Let's go. Okay, I have to stop there for today. Um, and the question was it wise for Marty to collect Benny from his school? Okay, yes, Benny was definitely traumatized by being left there, but they almost died, and that would have killed his mother. It would have just it would